I love that core value, never lay up.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give an example of like how you assessed someone's fit or alignment with that value? Like in an interview, is there a specific question you ask?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a behavioral question. Maybe it's something that they
Yeah.
express just throughout the interview. What does that
Yeah.
look like?
So it would be contextually, right? So if I'm interviewing someone in like finance, right? Finances might be a little bit harder, like an accountant, right?
Maybe you should lay up actually in finance. Maybe you
Yeah.
should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I
they're
would
like,
think,
no, balls to the wall, take a ton of risks. We're live with another episode of What Worked. Mike and I, being the terrible amateur golfers that we are, but we somehow think we're like cool and have actual cool style, couldn't be more excited to welcome Jason Richardson from Bad Birdie. If you've ever been out on the course and you've seen some dude or chick wearing a polo that just looks different, cool colors, cool patterns, chances are it's either Bad Birdie or a terrible Bad Birdie knockoff. As someone who grew up, like most kids, I learned golf from my dad. I will say that probably the worst part about golf is I just hated the stuffiness of it. The clothes you wore, they were uncomfortable. I mean, Jason, I feel like FootJoy was like dominant in the category and just so lame. And so the second that I saw Bad Birdie come onto the scene, I thought, this is really cool, really refreshing. And we're very fortunate to have gotten to know Jason, learn a bit about his story, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So, Jason, I've given you a very poor man's introduction. If you don't mind introducing yourself, who you are, and maybe giving your quick spiel on Bad Birdie.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. You actually did a pretty good job. So for anyone who doesn't know Bad Birdie, very much like what Tyler said, golf used to be a world that was very traditional. You had to act a certain way, look a certain way, be a certain type of person. And the brand really tried to flip that idea upside down. It started with taking the most worn piece of apparel in golf, which is a golf polo. Historically has always been solid colors, stripes, and we put prints on a golf polo, and that's where it all started. So that kind of caught on, and people agreed that golf can be way more, and we can reimagine the culture and what the sport means, right? It's an amazing game. It's an amazing, amazing sport, but it's obviously kind of been limited by the culture. And in the last 7-8 years, it's kind of been this renaissance around golf and more people playing the game, new people playing the game. And it's been really cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. Jason, I want to put some timestamps on this because it's 2024 and there's a lot of cool new golf brands out there.
Yeah.
Streetwear has entered with its influence into golf as well.
Totally.
But Bad Birdie was either the first or one of the first to try something different, new and fun, at least from our memory. And Tyler, I don't know if you remember, but the three of us, we met at a WeWork.
Yes.
It was 2018 or 19. So Bad Birdie, you started in 2017, right? And
Correct.
So you were one of the first movers in the space. And then we met in that WeWork. Shout out WeWork for creating the serendipity, but in LA in the Arts District. And we're like the three people at a long table. We're like, hey, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then we saw you had some designs up on your laptop, and we're like, this is awesome. So you guys were one of the first movers in, and now there's a bunch of people doing it.
Yeah, no, I think we got lucky. I think, starting a business, I was just like, it's like catching a wave, right? You have to catch the right wave and be there at the right time. And luckily, I had this crazy idea to make these shirts, and there weren't really a lot of other brands at the time doing that in the way that we were, in a way that was hopefully a little bit more aspirational versus just kind of novelty or something like that. And so, but I think the movement of golf transforming was already kind of starting to happen. Just no one had really capitalized on an apparel brand around it. And there's been a lot of cool success stories in the space after, us and a couple of the brands entered and kind of paved the way. And then a lot of people have been able to iterate and build really cool companies off that.
Take us back to that, those founding days. Because I've seen some really cool pictures of your apartment basically being totally inundated, slammed with all this apparel. But yeah, what was that like? And also, too, just for a second to back up, what were you doing before you decided to build Bad Birdie?
Great kind of place to start on the story. So I lived in Los Angeles and I worked in the film world. So I was doing TV commercials. So I was a hired gun, and I would go be it's called a line producer, and I'd go run around and get everything done. So I was putting out fires, managing budget and people, and it was really fun, but really hectic and stressful. And I just learned a lot about how to get shit done when no one else could, or you kind of have to push through. But flip side of that is I played a lot of golf in my downtime, and I had this idea after I went to a golf tournament that was outside of California with some Arizona buddies where I grew up, and they were kind of playing golf in the same way that my friends in LA were, and it was in a way that wasn't the typical traditional country club way. And I'm like, oh, this isn't just an LA thing, this is also an Arizona thing. And I had this idea of, hey man, what kind of clothing could I wear that would represent both of those kind of groups, which is a little bit more about the social golfer having a good time. We still want to be competitive. And so all that being said, had the idea driving back from this tournament. It was after Thanksgiving, November 2016. I got home and I texted a friend and I said, hey man, I want to start an apparel company. Or a brand as a side hustle. You've tried to do this before. Can I meet with you for coffee? And so I had a coffee with him for an hour, and he's like, hey, he kind of told me, hey, you need to go find a factory. You need to build a tech pack, some of these basic things. And so I literally started Googling and finding some of these factories or finding vendors. And I basically, in a 6-month period, living in LA, talking to friends, I figured out a place that sold fabric. I figured out someone to sublimate on that fabric, which is how you print the designs on. And I found this little mom and pop shop. This lady and her family would sew, and I could sew 10 shirts at a time. And I found like buttons.com and ordered buttons and labels and all this stuff. And I basically started a brand with 100 shirts. I put about $20,000 of my own money in, just kind of no business plan, as a side hustle, and launched it in May 2017. So we went live May 1st. I was doing a Hewlett Packard commercial that day. So I had like a 5:30 a.m. call time, and Arts District downtown. I launched it, and I sold like the first 3 polos. Were like, my friends, like it was just all people I knew. And that was kind of it was the genesis of starting an idea with no experience in apparel. I had no idea what I was doing. I made 10 designs. I got those designs from, I've had a friend who did graphic designs. I found places you could buy prints online, and I just kind of put it out and was like, hey, if this works, maybe I can sell 100 polos a month, and then maybe it'll scale and I can make a couple $1,000s a month to supplement my income. So that was the origin story. To launch. Yeah, side hustle. So it was a side hustle, and kind of the story that took us to kind of grow it was I sent it out. I sent some polos to a couple Instagram influencers. I also had friends that said, hey, when I wore this, 10 people came up and asked me what that shirt was. And so really word of mouth is how we grew. We kind of did influencer marketing. I didn't know what that was at the time, but I had someone post it, and 7 people bought it that day. If you wear a polo on the course, 30% of the people are going to sell another polo for the brand. So that's how we really grew in the early days.
That's amazing. Yeah, anybody who's ever seen a Bad Birdie polo can understand what you're saying. I mean, they pop. That, you see that person standing at the first tee, you're just like, hey, I love your polo. Like, where'd you get that? And I will say to add to some things, for anybody who doesn't live in Los Angeles, you just referenced a couple of things that I totally get being a native here now. Is when you mentioned kind of like the LA, I'm almost going to put a label on it, like Los Angeles muni golf scene. I would say anybody who gets the chance, play a course like Westchester down by the airport. You're going to see that's a come as you are golf, setting. It's like people are wearing, you'll find somebody's wearing, a Bad Birdie polo, someone who's like a really good golfer is rocking their whole Nike gear. But then right next to him is a dude rocking a big cigar, a Kobe Bryant Lakers jersey, and they've got like a boombox playing. That is one of my favorite LA experiences. So I totally get it. And I think that's very much like reflective of Bad Birdie as a brand. It's like the LA muni golf scene in the best possible way. And the other thing I'll comment on too is Mike and I have a lot of experience. Before we started Hireframe, we were looking to buy a business, and we looked at all types of companies, and we spent actually a lot of time in LA's fashion district, which is something in itself to kind of, a really cool business experience, because just like you said, you can get your fabric, you can get sublimation. Is that the process?
Sublimation. Yep.
Yeah, and then you can also find a sewing shop too. So it's quite unique. The city has plenty of things that kind of suck about it, but lots of cool stuff too. I gotta ask, when you did launch, was Shopify like as big as it is, now? How did you do that first launch?
Yeah, so did Shopify. I had my previous world, I had a Squarespace website for my portfolio, but Shopify everyone was like, I talked to 3 people who ran a Shopify, like ran an e-com business, like Shopify is it. So it was very clear from the early days. And I built the site in like a night. Like it was so easy to set it up, and you just like drag an image and you build a theme, and yeah, Shopify, they crush. It still is the best platform.
No, that makes total sense. And what were some of those early days? Just curious, I'm sure you have some awesome war stories, the apartment getting filled up with inventory.
Yeah, it's at some point there must have been like an inflection point where you're like, okay, I'm gonna stop producing TV
Yep.
commercials. This
Yeah,
thing's taking
exactly.
off, and then stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to set context, right? I was living in a big 5-bedroom apartment, and I had 4 of the roommates. We each had our own spot. I was in the master, and so Bad Birdie headquarters for the first 9 months, I would have bags that would have polos in them, and I would literally ship them in the morning. I would go to a job, and I would come back at night, fulfill some, and maybe drop it off or whatnot. And then I would answer emails during the day, and I would use my roommates' names to make it feel bigger than it was. So early on, I was really, really focused on making sure that it felt like a legitimate company and brand. I spent like $5 on a box to ship. It was just, I spent way too much money than we would on a, COGS perspective to really get it to make a premium brand. So it got to a point where we kept selling more, and I'd be traveling on a job, and I would, initially it was like, I'd ask my roommate, hey man, can you pack a shirt for me? And they're like, yeah, man, of course. But then when it started being like 10 shirts a day, it got to this spot where it was like, okay, I need to figure out a solution. And so I hired my friend Tim. He still works here. He's employee number one.
Amazing.
He runs all people, all operations. He's a linchpin in the organization. But there was a really clear turning point where it was like, okay, I can't ask my roommates to do this anymore. We're selling enough that I can hire someone to do this as a side hustle on their side. And it just continued to grow. And then we moved into Tim's parents' house. We rented a space there and kept growing, and eventually got a small warehouse in downtown LA that was like in a co-working type space for warehouse. And when we did that, I started to feel like, hey, we're becoming a real company. And so there's kind of 2 big risks you have in running an apparel company. And it's all tied to your assets, which is your inventory and then how you spend the cash on that. There was one time, it was like after a big launch, and I walked into the warehouse and there was 1,000 polos sitting there. This is maybe a year and a half in, and we had launched, and I had bought way too much inventory. And so I sat there saying, wait a second, I don't have enough money to pay for next month if I don't sell that inventory on the shelf. So I was like, okay, how do I figure that out? And so we started running Facebook ads. I just figured out, I'm like, I'm going to sign up for Facebook ads, and started running a little bit of ads to move that inventory. We also were like, oh, we can email people. Let's do email. And so we've continually, anyone in apparel can tell you never get your volumes right. So you're either under order or you over order. And so you're either missing revenue or you're having to move inventory to open up cash for another order. And then another example is, like 2 years into the business, we were growing, and I got an invoice for $100,000 that I wasn't paying attention to. We had like $10,000 in the bank account, and it was due like on Monday. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally missed this. And so I had to figure out $100,000. And I was at Waste Management, like 2 beers in,
Oh no. That's
calling
sobering.
hard money lenders to see how I could get money. I was like, they're like
Oh,
hard money and e-com, in the sense of like, there's a ton of
Mhm.
like, what is it? Clearco, or so there's so
Yeah.
many vendors that have come in and do that. And they're like, hey, we'll give you $100,000 and you'll pay us 130,000 back in a month. Things like that. They're pretty sharky. And what I ended up doing is I like negotiated a couple against each other and got that loan and paid it down. Like, it was just so much money and such a big miss. And
sure.
was kind of crazy. And that's happened. Both of those have happened multiple times. You kind of get blindsided sometimes trying to grow a business.
In going through those repetitions, though, like, what do you feel like you've taken from that in terms of your ability to be resilient, not totally basically lose your shit?
We're a golf brand, right? So it's very much about golf. You slice a shot or hook a shot into the woods, right? And you have to figure out a way to try to make par, even say bogey sometimes. And so you have to kind of stay calm, collected, and push through. And so there's this idea of resilience, and there's also this idea that, like, I've learned over time that, like, it's hard to surprise me anymore on certain things, right? Like, I could walk in and someone could quit, or something could be totally wrong, and we try to avoid that. But there's a certain part of just, you're kind of driving a car, you don't know what the check engine light's going to come on. You can do everything you can to worry about it. So it's balancing that. And then there's also this quote, I don't know where I heard this. It's the closer you are to failing, the closer you are to success. And so anytime that I was facing these things, I'm like, okay, this is a good sign. There's an opportunity to kind of come out the other side. And also, it's a growth pain, right? Like, ordering too much inventory or not having the cash to buy more inventory, those are good things, versus
Yes.
okay, it could be a downside thing where I'm like, stuff isn't going well. So we've been fortunate where I would say majority of our problems are due to fast growth versus
Mm-hmm.
decline.
No, that makes complete sense. And we've been talking about, I mean, I like that quote about, being closer to success, as you're closer to failure. We've been using the reference a lot of boxing. It's just like at this point, we've been punched in the face so many times. It's hard to truly rattle us at this point. And in many ways, I always look at it is that for the most part, when you do get kind of that knockback, it means you're in the fight, which is good versus being out of the fight. You've brought up a couple of things. You brought up, needing to get rid of sort of some inventory and real quick learning Facebook ads. Or,
Yeah.
it's like I've seen these pictures of your original kind of like content for the website, photo shoots,
Yep.
that sort of thing. What have you learned about just sort of getting shit done,
Yeah.
trying things out, experimenting, and just kind of
Yeah.
making a plan and doing something fast?
You almost have to have this idea, at least my experience has been bootstrapping the business. You have to be able to do every single job. And so I oftentimes have entrepreneurs that are trying to start a business ask me, hey, like they start talking about they need to hire a team. And I'm always like, no, the team is you until you think it is. And then it's even beyond that, it's probably you still. And so there's this idea that you have to just continue to learn and jump in and learn and adapt quickly, and learn how to get cash, learn how to run a Facebook ad, learn how to whatever the situation. I mean, I still have skill sets have massive deficits in now, and I'm continually having to learn and grow to keep up. Otherwise, the ceiling is myself. The ceiling of, in a lot of ways, the ceiling of a team is as great as the leader. So there's some famous quote that says that, right? And so for me, I'm like, I take that very seriously and have to continue to level up.
I want to ask you about that. In particular, I want to ask you, like, you've jumping ahead a little bit. You've grown. Bad Birdie's grown a lot. You've got a team now, with seasoned executives on it as well. And so I don't know if you've thought about this, but when do you stop trying to work on some of these like weaknesses that you have or like kind of blind spots and start just doubling down on all your strengths and allowing your, hired team to focus on those areas of expertise?
I kind of feel like I'm in the middle of that. So I'm giving you like live feedback. I mean, I
Give
think
it to us.
the thesis behind it would be that you hire for your weaknesses and you really double down on your strengths. And so oftentimes for me, the challenge is, okay, what are my strengths now in 2024 versus who was Jason in 2021? Or who was I when I was packing polos in my apartment and it was a different thing? And so it's this constant evolution where it's a lot of self-reflection and trying to see, hey, where am I getting stuck? Where did that meeting go really well? Where am I not helping out? And then also, one of the things we did this exercise end of last year in my leadership offsite. And we said, hey, what's the one thing you need to stop doing? And what's the one thing you need to start doing around the entire team, right?
I like that question.
My thing is I need to stay off the field. The team said, hey, Jason, you get too involved and you come in and you had every job and you can do it, right? But actually when you come in and try to take the ball and make the play, it actually causes more disruption. And you need to like trust us and let us you need to stay off the field. So that for me is like my current situation. And then sometimes there's moments where I'm like, wait a second, is that always the long-term play? Because you can get off the field and you get disconnected. And so it's a constant evaluation. I don't have the perfect solution, and then I just try to get feedback. I try to ask for feedback as much as possible.
We've gotten to know you a little bit, and that's very clear. You're great about seeking out coaching and feedback, and you seem just so open to growth, which is incredible. Some of the stuff that you mentioned, I just can't help but think about the recent conversation around that Paul Graham essay around founder mode. I don't know if that came across your social feed, but but that really resonates. I think there's a time for both, right? Something that Mike and I used to do in the early days of Hire Frame that we created a really bad, I would say like habit for all of our team members is we would assist them in writing their emails to customers and to different, key points of contact, because Mike and I, anybody who's ever worked with us know that we are like the things that we really, really give a shit about. One huge one is communication. We're both big believers in, being concise, being focused, being respectful of people's time, and that sort of stuff. And so anyway, we just got to a point as a business where everybody was sending their emails to Mike and me before they would send them
proofread and sign off
to proofread them. And then we were like, wait a second,
we were just so pissed and frustrated. We're like, what's going on? Like, and then we realized like probably months down the road, we did this to ourselves. Like this
Yeah,
was,
so this
we
would be
created
like,
this beast.
I'm picturing like this would be the golf equivalent if I'm like, if I'm, whatever, Max Homa's like swing coach and I'm out there, it's the Masters and I'm behind him in his hips, like, that sort of, it's just not a good thing. So we did have to get off the field. That resonates a lot, but it's hard, your business and just watching you kind of hit these new growth phases. I imagine that there's a lot of things that are required, and I think it's great. Founders are really good about understanding what's needed and then finding those people out there that can give them that information, that edge, all that sort of stuff. I don't know if you feel like that's fair.
It is. And I think
you as well.
I think that founder mode essay is really challenging for me because to me, I'm like, wait, I interpret that. Do I just need to go in and just stir shit up and get going? But then it's like that doesn't always work. And so it's a good point though. I think the way I take that is just being able to like staying sharp, so if I need to jump in, I can jump in as needed, right? And I think that is the responsibility that I have, right? Like that is my job. I need to be able to, something will fail, and if the team is failing and I can come in and find it and help, then I can. But otherwise, it's like, how do I just trust the team?
It should mean different things to different people, and depending on the stage of your company, that's what it means for you today. And I think for the folks that you mentioned that you're advising, and you're like, hey, this is your job, marketing's your job, product is your job. That's what founder mode should mean to them, right? Like you've got to do this for a long time before you hire someone. I want to go back. We're kind of talking about the growth story. You're building this business out of, your employee number one's parents' apartment.
Shout out Tim, right?
Yeah.
You're finding yourself short of cash here and there.
Yeah.
And I think the pandemic was a big inflection for a lot of businesses. It was for Hireframe for sure.
Yeah.
It was like positive, negative, positive, like big, and then big tailwinds. And I think around the same time you went on Shark Tank. Could you tell us about Shark Tank and that time frame around like 2020 where you went on the show, pitch? I think you closed the deal. And then also I'm curious what happened to Bad Birdie during the pandemic.
So context, 2020, the business was 3 years old. And so we had enough traction going into 2020. And when I say I got married during that time, convinced my wife to let me go all in and live on her salary. So quick highlight. Don't expect to pay yourself. I didn't pay myself the first time I paid myself was May 1st, 2020. So 3 years into the business, right? So just context, right? A lot of people think being an entrepreneur is sexy. It's not. Really, to be honest, in the first couple of years and even further along. 2020 was coming up. Business was growing. Took out a line of credit. Put everything on the line to personally guarantee it. It was a couple $100,000 to have a really big year in 2020. And so we buy our stuff, 9 months in advance. So we wanted to have inventory in house by March. So we placed the order. What is that? June of the previous summer. So had no idea about COVID. Had no idea about Shark Tank.
Right.
And so we were set up where the business was growing, and we took a big risk. And we're like, okay, let's go do this, right? Then got the opportunity to film on Shark Tank. And Shark Tank aired at a really, really good time. Coincidentally, it aired April 2020. So March in America is when COVID hit. Everyone was freaking out. It was the lockdown. Our sales dropped 95%. I had all this inventory. I was personally guaranteeing it. I remember I was like, we're probably going to go bankrupt if this is contagion and this is like people are dying everywhere and it's going to be what it was supposed to. We thought it could be in the beginning. I was going to be screwed. Then ended up going, Shark Tank aired and it crushed. We had done our best month was $120,000. We did $250,000 in 3 days after airing on Shark Tank.
Wow.
Woo. So sold a bunch of inventory, like paid off the line of credit. I could pay myself. And it was like, okay, this is working. And that was happening. But at the same time, we had started selling to some wholesale accounts. They were like, Jason, hey, we need to cancel our orders. And I was like, please don't do this. You're gonna, it's not good. Like I'm planning on this. And so this was after we had this big bump. They called and like, hey, our stores are closed. We can't do anything. What ended up happening is Shields was the only one. So if you guys know Shields, they're like a Midwest chain. They didn't cancel the orders. Every other one said, hey, press pause. But what ended up happening is they could open their doors and they just sold out. And so it was like a complete opposite of what we thought was going to happen. Golf became extremely popular.
Right.
Our doors that could sell it, it was like, if you had inventory, we'll take it. And we grew. It was a 1-2 punch that really accelerated. We basically we were positioned to have a big year from an inventory 9 months in advance. And we just had these two surprise kind of hits that really just helped us scale it. But the Shark Tank experience was insane. I ended up doing a deal on the show. I didn't take the deal afterwards. So we've been able to, we still own 100% of the company, my wife and I, and we've been able to bootstrap the business. We haven't put a dollar in since that initial amount in 2017. And so it's really been just like staying profitable from year one, being really smart on how we scale and grow and always being profitable. And but that Shark Tank experience was crazy. I mean, you're in there, you're filming, and you're in this big studio, and you've rehearsed it so many times. I've had friends. I knew every single fact. If I go on that show, I am not going to be the guy that doesn't know an answer. I like brought anyone that worked in a business was at my house the night before, being like, ask me any question.
Love it.
And so, yeah, it was really cool experience, and got a lot of publicity from it. But the reality of Shark Tank is that you get publicity, and then it airs another time in the summer, and then no one really cares after that. It still airs now, but it's kind of serving the same audience over and over. So I thought it would be like, oh my gosh, am I going to get on the cover of like Forbes magazine because I was on Shark Tank? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, what's that day like? Episodes, yeah.
What's that day like? You've been on sets and that sort of thing, so maybe you had some comfort there, but the final product is like a 15-minute, TV show from a consumer standpoint.
Yeah, so it's a lot of like film sets, hurry up and wait. So you show up. A cool story is you show up, and I was really, really self-conscious about. I drove a Prius that had like the back dinged in, and I was like so self-conscious. I was like, people know, if they know Bad Birdie, they see the owner driving this, they're gonna think it's it's a fake or something. I don't know why. I was just like and so I pulled up to Shark Tank with all these other entrepreneurs, and I was like, man, I'm gonna be the one with the beat up Prius. And every single person, we were all unloading, they were all driving really beater cars. And it was like it was this wake up call for me to be like, man, like the life of an entrepreneur. And even because the brand had been, we did $1 million that year, the year before, and it's like it is a grind. And it was like I was at home with other people, I was like, oh, I feel safe, like no one else here has a crazy car, like people are working their ass off, they're trying to make their dream happen. So you go, and then you're waiting all day, and then they'll call you out, and you go, and the sharks have no idea who you are, or they're filming 10 hours a day, and it'd be a blur for me if I was one of them, all the pitches they get all day.
Sure.
And then you're in there. I was in there for like an hour, and they cut it down, and I came in my head like I know every answer. I felt pretty cocky. In the first minute, I was like, I'm gonna be the guy that they think is a dumb idea, and they're gonna find the holes in it. But then when I told them the story and kind of the hustle and the revenue, they were like, okay, never mind, flip the switch, and they got a couple offers, and it ended up being this cool moment where Robert he had to make a putt for a percentage. Yes. And he ended up coming short. So it was like, hey, if you want, I think it was $300K for 25%, I'll give you it if you can make the putt. If you miss it, it's $20K. And he took the deal. And on the show, he missed it. So it was like this great TV moment, and that got a lot of publicity, which was helpful. So
that's super cool. And isn't there, correct me if I'm wrong, but you film it, there's still no guarantee you're ever going to make it to air, if I'm not mistaken, right?
There's no guarantee it's going to air. They don't take any equity in your company. They used to do that on the show, but they're basically like, hey, we'll let you know. And I found out 2 weeks before. So we were like,
sure.
And the thing is, I filmed it, months earlier. So it could have been one of those things where it could have aired like in the middle of winter. And it was luck when it aired and how it worked out. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Is there any type of like niche Shark Tank economy where what I'm thinking of is, are there like specific, private equity groups or investors that have reached out to you and said, hey, saw you on Shark Tank, we invest in these other Shark Tank, deals? Yeah.
So there's like this whole Shark Tank under whatever not secret. What I don't know what the word I'm trying to say is, but there's like a Facebook group. There's a Facebook group, and all these people talk. I haven't signed into it since the week after. I'm not a big like social Facebook guy, but then I got calls from people reach out on LinkedIn. The coolest one is Patrick Schwarzenegger from Arnold Schwarzenegger's son. He reached out, and I was on the phone with him. He's like, yeah, man, like I love your business. And there's a lot of people that watch that and they take notes and then they follow up. And so I got calls from other entrepreneurs, and it was cool. Like it was great. And definitely make some connections, but it's a flash in the pan. Like it's like it's a one-hit wonder in terms of a marketing play, right? Like you're gonna get it, and then people still know. But I would say majority of our customers don't know we were on Shark Tank. Maybe I could be wrong there, but
no, I think you're right. I mean, it's been so long ago, and like I feel like completely different company today.
Yep. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And then I guess, so you have that, you have that incredible moment where you think I'm going to be on Forbes, right? But then obviously a million things happened after that. And one thing I'm very curious to hear about is, started off with Tim, and now there's many Tims, right, at Bad Birdie. I would love to understand your sort of philosophy when it comes to team building, because you did start this, yourself in your house and then in Tim's parents' house. And, you have this distinct vision, but then now the company, Bad Birdie is quite large and continuing to grow. It's a real corporation of sorts. How do you maintain that kind of startup spirit?
Yeah, that's a great question around how do you maintain it, because we always are trying to figure that out. And but yeah, I mean the story. I mean the initial idea. It sounds simple now. Is like, okay, what is my low? What is the easiest, cheapest thing I can get off my plate? So at the time it was shipping, right? And then it was customer that someone that was nice to talk to and cared about people, could do customer service. So Tim helped with both those things, and that's where I started, and that's what he did. And then he ended up hiring people under him, and that's those things both scaled, and then Tim kind of started to scale. So, basic, if I could ship 10 packages in an hour and I was needing 20, then I would hire that person. I'd kind of let the math like scale on that side of it. And then as you grow, right? So we started growing, really, we moved the business to Arizona in the summer of 2020. And when I moved it out here, I had 2 employees, and I hired someone in to do our wholesale sales, because I had too many emails that I couldn't respond to about pro shops wanting to reach out. So it was kind of that mentality. Like, I do every job until I actually, like, if I work 100 hours in a week and I can't do this, then I'll hire someone.
Sure.
Versus like, I want to hire someone at that early stage. I mean, you basically have to either not sleep, and like, you're basically buying your time back to sleep in a sense. And so we've just scaled. And I think that the thing about culture, it's, we have 40 full-time employee, 40, I don't know, 40, 45, I think right now, here in Scottsdale. And it's a completely different culture than it was in the early days. And I think, or it feels different. Sorry, I should clarify what I'm saying. It feels different, but a lot of the culture has stayed similar. But just the inherent nature of, I mean, it's like you have a friend group of, 3 people and the new friend joins. And it's like, okay, well, it's different dynamics. So when you have 40 people, it's a different dynamic. But we really kind of focus on 3 different things when it comes to how we've operated the business. And everyone want to ask what core values are. I used to have 6. Then I got it down to 3. You guys want to talk about core values?
Yeah, what are the 3 or 6? Yeah.
You teased it. You went 6 for 3.
Yeah, so I think the thing when you're early starting, right, you're kind of on like you almost feel like you're like a preacher, and you're trying to get people to come in and work for no money and join this mission. And it's like, you get to be on the ground floor, and you get to be sitting next to 3 people and just like figuring it out. Like, when we moved out here 4 years ago, I didn't have Slack. I didn't have a calendar invite. I had no emails. It was just, you just show up to the office and just figure it out. Like, there's literally no strategy. There's no decks. There's no planning. Now everything's, my calendar and decks and all this stuff. It's all about building process. But early days, it's all about like selling a mission. And then as you start scaling, you have to say, hey, you used to do this thing. Now you've done such a good job, I have to take it away from you, or take part of it to give it to someone else so you can actually do it. And so some people, they're like, okay, I totally get that. And some people are like, wait, no, you can't take that away from me. And so it's this continual thing of like, hey, I need you to do this. This is awesome. You're contributing. You've done such a good job that I have to take it away or I have to pivot. And so there's this balance of going from just what motivates people. It feels like a family, and now it probably feels more like a team. But the principles are there. We talk about, so 3 things we talk about is come as you are. So it's all about no ego, having empathy, showing up. And if someone's going to be voting for Trump and someone's voting for Biden walking in the office, they should be totally fine to be able to talk to each other, right? Where the rest of the world's not like that. Same thing as I used to show up to golf courses having to have my shirt tucked in. I had so much anxiety about that. Bad Birdie, you can wear whatever you want, right? Like, be respectful, wear whatever you want. We want to have that environment here at the office. Second thing is stay gritty. Can someone do hard things, right? If someone wants an easy job, Bad Birdie's not the place for them. I did a lot of CrossFit when it was popular, and I think our working here should feel like a CrossFit class. You should feel sweaty, but you're also like, man, I feel great afterwards. It's not like an easy walk in the park, because we're trying to do something really big and really cool. And some people love that, and some people want to cruise by every day and, get off right at 5 o'clock and walk out. Like, that's just not the right spot for us, right? People that are here want to contribute to a greater vision. They want to work hard. They find value in that. And some people don't, and that's okay if they don't fit that. And the third thing is never laying up. So, in golf, there's a lot of opportunities where you might have, your 270 out, you got water, I'm going to pull out my 3-wood and go for it, So that's kind of the mentality where you always got to be taking risks. But that's where we've landed on our core values. But we used to have core values like 2 years ago, we had 6, and we revisit it as a leadership team end of every year. And one of our core values was have a fucking good time. So it was HAFGT. And people
Yeah.
loved it. They were like, I want to have a great time at work, right? Like I have to have a great time at work.
Yeah.
And that was a really good idea in theory. But then people are sitting there being like, well, I don't really want to work hard right now. So, but that's not fun to me. So I'm not going to do that. It built a little bit of a culture of like entitlement and like, I'm
Yeah.
only here to make work fun. And work isn't fun because you say it's fun. It's fun because you are contributing to a greater mission. You get to work with people that care about you. And you are actually like, you are contributing to something that wasn't there when you came in that day. And it's a really misleading thing for our team when you say, hey, let's just have a good time. So we tried to swing it, and I came back and did we took our core values, narrowed them down, and I was like, all right, 6 core values, and it was 3, and the core values were empathy, grit, and innovation, and I had a whole on meltdown from the team.
Yeah.
We were in an all hands meeting, and
What
I
are you
always did,
doing?
yeah, there was questions at the end, and I was literally like an intervention. They were like, we're losing everything, we can't handle this, like you're changing the core values. And to me, I'm very logical. I'm like, guys, empathy is the same exact thing as come as you are. Innovation is the same thing as never lay up. But it was a great learning for me where it's like, you have to, when you talk about culture, right, you have to almost market to your employees and get them, like, people still choose to come here every day. And there is a reality that like our brand, we would never say innovation. We would say never lay up. That's who we are. We would say stay gritty, or we would say come as you are versus empathy. And so for me, it was a really good learning that like, in the way that you think you're being a big business, you have to have corporate or follow these bigger ideas. We can just be ourselves, and it's okay that like we're gonna do things in the Bad Birdie way, even internally with staff.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about someone being like, dude, first you're going to take away our good fucking time, and now you're going to use all these corporate jargony words. I could totally see that. But it is a balance. I'm curious. You seem to have had all this, you didn't come from the traditional business world. You were running around these production sets. Was there, especially as Bad Birdie was growing, was there anybody in your life that was particularly influential, or it could even be in some cases? I know you're a reader too. We've talked about stuff like traction and that sort of thing. Was there any sort of like a book or a person that was particularly influential as you were building the business?
I started finding myself really, listening to like business podcasts, and I was like, what these guys are saying, they're saying the same thing I'm dealing with. Um, I loved listening to like how I built this, just to hear those stories was really good. And then there's specific podcasts I would jump in on, whether it's email marketing or it's fulfillment or how to source. And then as that kind of got those understanding there, then it was like, okay, now I have a team of 15 people, and I don't really know how to communicate what I'm trying to say to them, or there's conflict, or everything feels disorganized. So I started reading books on operating and like also how to be a better leader. So Traction is a great book, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs use it now. It's like this EOS operating model, and we use that still, and it's a great model. It's basically a textbook that's like, hey, set 3 to 5 KPIs per leader for the year, and then track it on a weekly basis, quarterly. It's like, it just gives you a textbook of like how to operate. And so that was really helpful. I read a book, Start With Why, by Simon Sinek, about brand. We're so, in apparel, you live or die by the brand and what it means to wear what we represent. So that's really good. Good to Great. It's in a good leadership
Yes,
book. And then I think just always trying to learn. I literally would just DM people on LinkedIn and be like, hey, can I talk to you? Like a founder of a big company. And they would be like,
that's
yeah, I can give
cool.
you 15 minutes. And I would just talk to them. And so there's been people that I've been able to build some relationships in. A lot of people have given me like free time to just talk. And so I always try to do the same thing when other entrepreneurs reach out, to be like, hey, I can probably teach you or give you some wisdom throughout the journey.
I can't help but make a opportunistic transition there. So speaking of reaching out, I think that's one of the best hacks that founders can do. Hire Frame, I actually reached out to you about helping out with one of your key hires, and what I found was incredible about that experience is I knew you a little bit. We had run into each other at the WeWork. I was a fan of your brand. I had kind of followed the story. What impressed me was really you had a fairly, I would describe, polished process for hiring people. and how to really be a great evaluator of talent, but also understand how that talent really fits in with what you're building at Bad Birdie, the culture, where you guys need to go. Would you mind kind of sharing a little bit about your, what your process is and kind of like how you approach very tactical things like scorecard and culture fit and all that?
We're trying to get better at this, and I think this is a lot of stuff that I can't take credit for. All the team has helped with this, but we try to evaluate talent on soft skills and hard skills in a way. And so we'll first use, I'll give shout out to Traction, the gets it, wants it capacity. So does someone get what their job is and what the role is in the greater mission of what we're doing? Do they know their role on the team, right? Like Bill Belichick, do your job. Like, do they know what their job is every day or what it will be? Do they get it and then gets it, wants it? Do they actually want to be here? We don't want to hire anyone that's lukewarm and doesn't really want, like, we don't want to hire someone who's here just for a paycheck, because our culture is pretty active. I mean, people's best friends are from Bad Birdie, not because we plan it, but it just happens in the culture we've built. And then the capacity is, they have the capacity to do it, right? So golf, right? I don't have the capacity to play from the tips at the Masters, right? Or I don't have the capacity to go compete at professional golf because I don't have the skill set to do that, right? I have the capacity to go shoot a 90 at, maybe a tough course. And so with that, people a lot of times get it. They understand what they could do. They want it, but they don't have the capacity to do it. They really, really want to play at the Masters, but they don't. I really would love to compete in the Masters tournament, but I can't. It would be a waste of everyone's time if I did that. So that's one side of it. And we rate based on a scale of 1 to 5. And what we did recently is I just kind of wrote some notes on it. I threw it over to ChatGPT and they built out a whole scorecard for us to kind of expand on that. So, hey, 5, 4, 3, and then you rate it. The other side of that is our internal core values. So then we rate people against come as you are, come as you are, stay gritty, and never lay up. And what we do is we run that process through different people. So, generally the direct hiring manager, potentially some colleagues, and then usually either myself or our COO will do kind of like a final, or someone else in the leadership team will do a final interview. And we really just kind of try to vet and quantify people in a way, because there's so much volume and so many things, and at least in the initial screening process start quantifying. We're still working on it though, right? I mean, hiring people it's a tough game, and evaluating them and making the tough decision. Yes. And it's a really tough game. We just hired someone to kind of help lead that for us internally, like our full like HR person, which will be really helpful. So I'm excited for it to continue to get better. But that does that kind of give good context of how we hire, or try to?
Yeah. And hiring is a lifelong journey. Like, that's what we do. We're a recruiting company. And so we've hired thousands of people. And so the question is always like, how can we get better? And that's actually, I want to ask you, I love that core value, never lay up. Mm-hmm. Could you give an example of like how you assessed someone's fit or alignment with that value? Like in an interview, is there a specific question you ask? Yeah. Maybe it's a behavioral question. Maybe it's something that they express just throughout the interview. What does that look like?
So it would be contextually, right? So if I'm interviewing someone in like finance, right? Finances might be a little bit harder, like an accountant, right?
Maybe you should lay up actually in finance. Maybe you should.
Yeah. Well, the thing I would think, no, balls to the wall, take a ton of risks.
So certain
potential IRS audit. No, you're like, okay.
No. I think, but like for someone like an accountant, you might want to ask a question around changing platforms, right? Mm-hmm. We don't want them to change like standard GAAP accounting or structure. Like, we're not going to change accounting, but if they want to change are they open to doing things differently, right? Mm-hmm. Sales, you could ask someone, you could have them just throw them on a spot, be like, hey, sell me this. Like I love the Wolf on Wall Street, sell me this pen. You could just kind of shoot from the hip and give them something to see if they feel comfortable. How do they react to that situation, right? Are they going to be like, oh my gosh, I wasn't prepared for this? Or maybe for that role, we need someone in sales who can just talk to someone on the street to be able to sell something. So we're going to test that. On marketing or design, right? If it's a position, we'll have to do a project and share what their idea is. For you guys, you help us hire our head of e-commerce, and we had an idea of, you can very clearly see a lot of people, especially in acquisition marketing, performance marketing, people just play it safe and trying ideas that are new or outside of the box. And so there's different ways, I would say, to test it. And that's what we're trying right now with pretty good success.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there was something that you actually brought up when we were helping you out with the head of e-commerce role, or VP e-commerce role, that I really appreciated, is that you talked about asking someone to really explain metrics, but explain metrics in terms of, look for their ability to connect these metrics to the actual, growth of the business, versus just kind of saying, like, rattling off a bunch of acronyms, and then being able to define what they are, being able to understand what is, the impact of this metric on another, and how does that impact the overall, financial goals of the business. I thought that was really astute, and it's very clear that you're learning, right? I'm sure you're learning with each role. I was going to switch gears. You brought this up a couple times, and this is very familiar for higher frame. Oftentimes, we're working with companies, and we're adding these roles, and it's typically because somebody at the internal team at that company has, too much, basically overflow of workload, and they need to be freed up to focus on the things that are the highest value work to the business. So call it your strategic initiatives, your accounting manager spending way too much time doing data entry and not enough time thinking about, the financing of your future purchase orders or that sort of thing, right? So I'm curious, with your team, as you guys grow, how do you approach that as a leader in terms of allowing people to really, like, how do you spot, when a team member is kind of spending way too much time doing something that's not the best, value add? And how do you have those conversations when I'm sure someone, on your e-commerce team comes up and they're like, I need 17 specialists for each of all these, things or whatever. How do you kind of manage that as a leader?
Yeah. So I would probably start with I always like this idea of, like, starting with the end in mind. So if someone comes and says I need to hire someone, I'm like, well, what are you trying to achieve? Lots of people have come up to me and be like, well, I just want to be a manager. I just want to learn what it's like to lead people.
Sure.
And I'm like, that's great, but how's it going to make things better, right? So let's just say we're talking about e-com, right? If someone's like, hey, I want to have someone underneath me. Well, I'm like, are we beating our revenue goals? Are we becoming more efficient? Are we finding ways where, like, is the growth unlocking it, right? I go back to when we were talking about shipping, right? If I could ship 10 boxes an hour and I only ship 10 boxes a day and I had an hour a day, then I don't need to hire someone. But if I start seeing growth where I need to supplement it, that's where it's at. I guess that hopefully that's a good idea. And then I would also just look at them on a skill set and say, hey, let's talk through what you're doing. Where are you? We use this principle called the 70-30 rule. So ideally, you should be operating on 70% of the time. You should be doing things that come naturally to you. 30% of the time, you should be doing things that are challenging. That's like a general, strong way. That's like you're challenging yourself enough, but not too much. If someone's operating in I'm doing 20%, 80, like 80% of what I'm doing is really hard, that would then be assigned either two things. They're not the right fit for the role. They don't have the capacity to do it, or they are overworked and they need someone to come in.
Makes sense.
And so for me, my theory on this might be a little contradictory. I generally think that people that are really high capacity, they kind of will figure it out on their own versus, like, coming to you and being like, hey, I need more people. I'm like, well, a leader, to have people under them, they almost have to be able to figure it out. And it's going to, like, I don't know if what I'm saying is right. I think it's probably tied to grit, but
yeah,
just kind of, like, figure it out and then come back and pitch an idea versus, like,
Yeah. That resonates.
I'm not really communicating with. I'm not really saying.
No, that
to you
resonates.
No.
Now it's making me think about what we're doing at higher frame. It's similar experiences. I think someone who is, like, at max capacity, someone who has a high capacity for work and they're maxing out, there's probably a few things they do before they come and ask for a direct report or, like, another hire. They're tackling solutions with, maybe it's new tools, maybe it's new process. A lot of times it's prioritization. And that's usually communicated to you before they ask, like, hey, I've exhausted everything we can do here. I think, like, it's usually, like, the last resort is, like, let's bring on new team members. There's usually, like, process improvement, maybe it's tools, technology, prioritization, and then it's like, okay, we've maxed out our team's output here. I think it's time to bring on a new hire or a new person.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, and I go back to, I think you've said this, and it's something that I think a lot about. I'll just be candid. I think you said something similar. I'm not a great manager of people. No one that I've ever managed would say that I'm good, and I get that. But something that I do try to be pretty religious about is I try to constantly find as many opportunities as possible to work with direct reports on that ability to understand the business. I hate to say holistically, but let's just use that cheesy jargon word, but understand the business. What goals are we trying to achieve as a business? And it's that muscle, that ability to connect your work with those goals to me, if you get a direct report to be able to do that practice time and time again, to your point, I think it's the grit part, but it's also that skill set, which is a combination. They need repetitions, but they also, to use a golf analogy here, you're going to have your player that's they're playing the course, they're playing whatever, the Masters on a Sunday, and they're trying to win the tournament, right? And they're in the game, they're locked in on every shot. But then there's also the caddy, the coach, whatever you want to say it. They're seeing the entire field, and they're understanding that you might feel shitty about that hole where you just bogeyed and you don't feel great about that. But actually, that's one of the 3 holes that we said you're going to potentially bogey, right? And it's about attacking these next 3 holes after that, where you have like real scoring opportunities. It's that ability to kind of see whatever it is, see the forest through the trees. I think that's the kind of like the sweet, balance. It's the grit plus that vision. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, and it's it's also the willingness to change. I think a lot of people don't like to change. I think it's like inherently like
it's
I come
scary.
in. Yeah, and it's like even me. I mean, I come in, I sit, my routine. I come in, I check my email, I do the same thing every morning, and it's like that almost becomes comfortable. And it's like, okay, well, what if I just go sit out at the kitchen table or do things differently? And it's like, can I change? And that's how we try to really push this never lay up. And I think sometimes it's cool to have like a big campaign, right? That's maybe for the brand, we're never laying up. But me personally, like, am I actually going to change the way that I show up each day? That's a lot harder because it's actually self-reflection impacts me more. And so the thing that I think about is, if I'm someone that wants to grow in my company and bring my team, what I would look for is someone to come to me to and say, hey, Jason, here's my proven success. Here's what I've done that's shown that this is achieving the greater mission that we're doing as a company, right? Mm-hmm. And here's how much time I've worked on, and I want to let you know this is how I've improved my process over the last X amount of time. And I actually think it's in the best interest of the business that we bring someone else in to help achieve the mission. Versus, hey, Jason, we need someone else because I'm really busy. I'm like, everyone's busy, dude. Or whoever it is, like everyone's busy. Yeah. So it's like, it's just like, how do we think more like that entrepreneurial mindset?
Entrepreneur. Yeah, that's my old when I was an employee, my old boss used to say that all the time. He would say, you in a nice way, he would say you really operate as an entrepreneur. And that you really take ownership of your piece of the business. And that conversation you just gave as an example, I mean, come on, any CEO, founder, yes, like just the ability to eloquently state why you need this resource, all that's very positive. I'm going to switch gears and then we'll wrap up here with kind of a few last questions. First, golf is changing. I don't know if there's a catchy word for it. I'm going to say golf 2.0. I'm going to be that lazy about it. But I'm just thinking about what has happened in the last couple of years when it comes to, going to give you your flowers here. Very cool brands like Bad Birdie and others that are just making, honestly, golf apparel not suck, which is awesome and appeal to me. And then, YouTubers, influencers, these range rats. I'm just kind of curious, as someone who's in the industry, what your kind of perspective is on where is golf going, and how do you think about that as it pertains to Bad Birdie?
So I think similar to what we're talking about openness to change, golf was a sport that didn't want to change for a long time. It was really comfortable being really focused in tradition and really focused in, kind of the ecosystem was country clubs, and it was all about performance or the tradition or the exclusivity of it. And so what happened is I think people started playing it more with COVID changing. I also think for whatever reason, it just, with social media, people just started showing the, like a brand like us or other brands or social media or whatever, they just started showing the sport in a way that it hadn't been portrayed before in a public way, where I think I would argue that probably some of, the way that the Bad Birdie way of playing golf, or the way that it is now, that's more, fun, inclusive, recreational, that's been going on for a long time. No one's ever really just like amplified it. And so there's this kind of golf renaissance, I could say, going on where, I think we're all working towards this, you could call it golf nirvana, where anyone can play. You go out and, there's cold beers on every hole if you want it. People are shaking hands. It's moving from the golf clap to fist bumps. It's moving from, hey, you have to act this certain way that anyone can play the sport. And then with that, right, everyone's kind of showing up in their own way. So everyone's walking up trying to make this future state happen, and people kind of claim their own way where, there's people that are at country clubs and are making those changes and want to change that. There are people that are the range rats, and they are your golf specialist who's been, hitting 100 balls a weekend for the last 20 years to get to their point, one index. And then there's the people that have taken it and been like, hey, golf is awesome. I'm going to build streetwear out of this, and I'm going to embrace the sport off the course, maybe even more so than on the course. And I'm going to build a lifestyle around it. And I think for a brand like us, we kind of hit, all those, but our main focus is on the social side of it. I think our customer is someone that really believes in a great hang on the golf course. And it's one of the most fun things you can do with your friends. And you can go out there and literally compete and just talk and play. And you're just like, golf is this amazing playground, and there's community built around it. And I think our brand, out of all these people kind of marching towards golf nirvana, that's kind of where we do it. And we do it in a pretty bold way. And I think there's a lot of people that are doing the same thing, that, there's a lot of brands that try to compete in our space. There's a lot of brands that compete in the, streetwear space. And to me, I'm like, it's all good. Like, golf is changing, and it's better than it was a year ago, and it's better than it was 5 years ago. The only thing negative is that you can't really get tee time some places, and there's not a lot of country club, like golf. It's become so popular that there's almost like too much demand for it. But I mean, that's a good problem to have in a sport that was just like, felt like it was dying. So
Totally. I think that to that point, some of the stuff that I've seen around people really making golf, just driving ranges a destination in itself, I think that's one of the best opportunities, because golf itself, the courses just require a ton of land. And depending on where you are, it's like, I am not naive in thinking that LA Muni golf is going to get good anytime soon. There's just too many golfers, too few, tee times. But and then I loved what you said about just a really good hang. I don't know if this is the experience for you guys, but my wife's favorite question to ask when I come back from golf is, what did you and your buddies talk about? And I just, for the life of me, I don't know. I'm like, it's like everything and anything. And that to me is like
nothing.
A sign.
My answer is
like
always nothing.
It was a true hang. There was no she's like, come on, you were out there for, 5-6 hours.
Yeah.
You didn't talk about anything. And I'm like, no, we talked about lots of stuff. I just don't remember. Because it was a good time. That's amazing. And I guess in that light, this is, I know a cheesy, vague question, but what do you want for Bad Birdie? What do you see? Do you want to do this for forever? By the way, I also know all three of us are dads, so I don't know kind of how you think about it as, your young, kids are growing up, and as they get older, do you want to be like, checking patterns and that sort of stuff? What are kind of your thoughts around that?
I try to take the long-term question. You can, I would say day by day, but we obviously plan longer than that. And I think, I'm committed to continue to grow this brand, and as long as our customers keep supporting us and there's demand for it, we'll keep doing it I'll keep doing it as long as I can. And I think, just about the future of the brand, right? Like, we started with printed polos. I'm wearing, like this cool wind shirt we made for, Team USA. We got the President's Cup this week. So
cool.
Just things like that where like we're evolving, right? So to me, it's like, how do we serve our core customer and what they came to us for? We still serve them, but just as the sport has evolved, our customer will evolve. And so how do we serve those new customers, try new things? Like what I'm wearing now is a never layup piece, right? Or something new that we've never done. And then just, I think there's still so much room for where golf is going, where, there's still so many places that are very traditional and very, maybe not as open to see kind of what's happening in the space. And so I still think we're in the first quarter of, this game of the new golf area. I think it'll probably get a little bit more streamlined. There's been so much hype around it and so much interest in it. And I think it'll probably get a little bit more refined and probably better. I think at the end of the day, my girls are going to probably be able to play golf, if they hopefully play golf in a really cool way, with probably a little bit less of the nerves around, it's not tied to the sport, right? How do I show up? What do I wear? Totally. It's going to hopefully be more inclusive. It'll be the same thing as just going and, shooting hoops in the front yard kind of thing.
Yeah, they can rock that Kobe Bryant jersey if they want.
Yeah, totally. Totally. To me, the vision is that one day, the tour players don't look like old man golfers. 99% of those tour players, they just look, they're still, you can just see that's kind of the last thing to break. And so I think that one day, I hope that, golfers are out there wearing whatever is new. Like, can they be wearing, you were seeing some of the changes, right? Can they be wearing shorts? Can they be wearing chains? Can they be wearing, if they want to wear a traditional polo, they can, right? But you see all this kind of personality and swag and all these other sports, but golf it's starting to change like a little bit, right? But like to me, when those guys are, you know, there's some more personality out there. I think that'll be kind of like, okay, we've made it, and then maybe I'd be done.
Yeah, you're making me think of what was it, the famous, I think it was Jason Day's second day of the Masters, first day of the Masters, whatever that outfit was. You know, the courage to wear whatever. Very cool. Well, we always like to leave things off with, people are going to be listening to this and
Yeah.
hopefully inspired. Who are you looking to reach out to you, and where do you want them to find you? I guess is the question.
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I try to stay pretty active on there. You can follow us on Bad Birdie Golf on all of our socials and everything there. And I appreciate everyone listening. Hopefully there was some value out of it.
There's a ton.
Stories that were meaningful.
Without a doubt, this was awesome, Jason. We really appreciate your time. We know you don't have a ton of it. And just, we've had the good benefit of working directly with you. We know about your story. We're fans of the brand. What you've done is nothing short of incredible, and we're super excited for this. Truly is the first quarter, so let's see what else is coming down the road. No laying up. And on that note, we'll end this episode of What Worked. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, guys.